It's just another ordinary day for Masao Yoshida. He's a 56-year-old engineer and the plant manager at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Like every day, he's assigning tasks, reviewing reports, and making sure everything is running smoothly. Little does he know that at this very moment, about 180 kilometers away, events are set in motion that will lead to one of the greatest disasters in the history of Japan. Just offshore, the earth starts trembling. A magnitude 9 undersea megathrust earthquake shakes the region. The Japanese are used to earthquakes, but this one is different. It's the most powerful one the country has ever seen, and it will trigger a chain of events that will change the world forever. The world watches in horror as news reports flood the airwaves. Images of destruction and flooding coming out of Japan are simply heartbreaking. This isn't just another tremor. It's a catastrophe on a scale the country has never faced. Soon, a new fear grips the nation. The reactors at Fukushima are in trouble. There are serious concerns about radioactive material leaking into the environment. Masao Yoshida is in his office when the earthquake strikes. The building shakes violently, but it holds. However, by the time the shaking stops, the entire nuclear plant has lost power. The quake has completely cut Fukushima Daiichi off from the electrical grid. Now, you might be thinking, don't nuclear plants generate their own electricity? And you'd be right, but paradoxically, they still rely on external power to operate safely, especially to run the crucial cooling systems. Fukushima Daiichi has 6 reactor units. Inside each reactor are thousands of radioactive fuel rods. The process of nuclear fission generates intense heat, which boils water into steam. That steam then drives massive turbines to produce electricity. It's a powerful and efficient process. But it comes with a major challenge. Even after a reactor is shut down, the fuel rods remain incredibly hot for a long time. They continue to produce something called decay heat. Without constant cooling, these rods will overheat, melt down, and release catastrophic amounts of radiation. Immediately after the earthquake, the reactors at Fukushima automatically shut down, just as they were designed to. This is called a scram. The control rods inserted themselves into the reactor cores, halting the fission chain reaction, but the decay heat problem remained. To deal with this, the plant's emergency diesel generators kicked in, powering the pumps that circulate cooling water around the reactor cores. For a moment, it seemed like the safety systems had worked perfectly. The engineers breathed a collective sigh of relief. But their relief was tragically short. The real disaster hadn't even begun. The earthquake had done more than just shake the ground. It had spawned a monster. A colossal tsunami was now racing towards the Japanese coast. The plant's seawall, designed to withstand waves up to 5.7 meters high, was about to be tested like never before. The first wave hit, and it was a giant, but the second wave was even bigger, a terrifying wall of water over 14 meters high. It crashed over the seawall with unimaginable force, flooding the entire plant site. Water surged into the turbine buildings where the emergency diesel generators were located. Salt water is a death sentence for electrical equipment. One by one, the generators short-circuited and failed. The plant was plunged into total darkness. This was a station blackout, the ultimate nightmare scenario for a nuclear power plant. No grid power, no emergency power. Nothing. Inside the control room, panic set in. The instruments went dark. The engineers had lost all control and monitoring of the reactors. They were flying blind. They knew the cores were heating up, but they had no way of knowing how fast. Masao Yoshida and his team were now in a desperate race against time. Without power to the cooling pumps, a meltdown was no longer a possibility. It was an inevitability. The clock was ticking. Yoshida had to make impossible decisions with incomplete information. He ordered his team to find any power source they could. They scrambled to find car batteries, trying to rig them together to power at least a few critical instruments. They needed to know the water levels and pressure inside the reactors. Every second that passed, the temperature inside the cores was rising. The water covering the fuel rods was boiling away, exposing them to the air. Once exposed, the zirconium alloy cladding of the fuel rods would react with the superheated steam, creating hydrogen gas, a highly explosive substance. As pressure inside the reactor vessels skyrocketed, there was a risk of a catastrophic rupture. Yoshida faced a horrifying choice: vent the radioactive steam into the atmosphere to relieve the pressure, or risk the entire containment vessel exploding. Venting would mean deliberately releasing radiation into the environment, contaminating the surrounding area. But not venting could lead to an even worse explosion that would release far more radiation. With the government's reluctant approval, Yoshida ordered his men to manually open the vents. This was a suicide mission. The areas they needed to access were filled with lethal levels of radiation, clad in protective gear that offered minimal shielding. Brave workers ventured into the darkness, navigating through debris-filled corridors to turn the valves by hand. They were later dubbed the Fukushima 50. The anonymous heroes who stayed behind to fight a battle they couldn't see. Despite their heroic efforts, it was too little, too late. On March 12th, less than 24 hours after the earthquake, a massive hydrogen explosion ripped through the Reactor 1 building. The concrete structure was blown to pieces, exposing the damaged reactor to the sky. The world watched in shock. Over the next few days, similar explosions occurred at Reactor 3 and Reactor 4. The situation was spiraling out of control. With no other options left, Yoshida made a final, desperate gamble. He decided to use seawater to cool the reactors. This was a scorched earth tactic. Pumping seawater into a reactor would permanently destroy it, contaminating it with salt and rendering it useless forever. It was an admission of total defeat, but it was the only way to prevent a complete, uncontrolled meltdown that could have made a huge part of Japan uninhabitable for centuries. There was just one problem. The Prime Minister's office, hesitant about the economic and political fallout of destroying the multi-billion-dollar reactors, initially told him to wait. But Yoshida knew there was no time. In an act of incredible defiance, he ignored the direct order from his superiors and the government. He famously told his team, "We're doing it. Stop pumping the water." He knew he would be fired, that his career was over. But he also knew that thousands of lives and the future of his country were at stake. He chose to save Japan. This decision likely prevented a far worse catastrophe. The seawater cooled the cores enough to slow down the melting process. It was a chaotic, messy, and desperate fight. But Yoshida and his team held the line. They battled explosions, radiation, and exhaustion for days on end, working in unimaginable conditions. Masao Yoshida became a national hero, the man who stood against the abyss and refused to back down. He continued to lead the containment efforts for months, until he was diagnosed with cancer, likely exacerbated by the stress and radiation exposure. He passed away in 2013, a true samurai who sacrificed everything to protect his people. The story of Fukushima is a sobering reminder of the immense power we wield and the incredible responsibility that comes with it. It's also a story of unimaginable courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable spirit of people like Masao Yoshida and the Fukushima 50, who faced an impossible situation and chose to fight. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories from history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.